Hello everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to dissect a squid. So here is the squid in front of you, and you can see this is where the head is, this is where the back is, and the first thing I want to show you is the skin. So if you look at the skin, it's covered in these dots. You can tell that one side has less dots on it than the other side. This is part of the counter shading, so it's lighter on the belly, which is the ventral side, versus the dorsal side. And this skin, if you look up close, these are actually the chromatophores, these little dots. So these are individual cells with pigment inside of them, and you can actually pull this skin off, okay? Okay, and the whole thing just kind of peels off. And that's the skin of the squid, which has those chromatophores inside of it. I can go ahead and peel off the entire thing. This is what you would do if you were actually going to eat this squid. This is a common species of squid that's found here in the Pacific, and it's what we typically would be eating when we eat calamari, and I'll show you exactly how you do that. But the first step is just to peel off all of this skin because you don't want to eat the skin. It's kind of fun to do. I also wanted to show you what it looks like to view the chromatophores under a microscope. So you can see they're like little water balloons that can shrink and grow, and that is how the animal can change its colors. And I also wanted to show you a video clip that talks about the evolution of these chromatophores.
So how do they control all this color change? Is it voluntary or some kind of built-in reflex? That's what researchers at Stanford University wanted to know. So they anesthetized the squid and then snipped the nerve from the brain that controls the chromatophores, but only on one side of the animal. The brain essentially couldn't send messages to the tiny muscles that control those chromatophores anymore, almost like turning off a light switch. But after a few days, they noticed something strange. The chromatophores began blinking again, even though they were no longer getting signals from the brain. So what does this mean? Well, what it suggests is that color change might be a bit like breathing is for humans, something we can either choose to do or do automatically, only even cooler. Because unlike breathing, color change requires an awareness of your surroundings. And in these animals, that awareness is spread throughout the skin, as if the skin itself could see. It would be as if your skin knew what color the walls were, even with your eyes closed. For a soft and squishy creature trying to stay alive in a very big ocean, it's a pretty spectacular defense.
So that's pretty much all the skin off. You can see underneath a lot of the ink that's coming out. So the next feature I want to show is, so this is the dorsal surface. On the other side, you'll see this tube that's right here. You can see it goes all the way through. This is the siphon, okay? This is what they're using for jet propulsion. So they are sucking water in and shooting it out and going backwards like that. And again, this is on the ventral surface. On the dorsal surface, you'll notice something really cool up at the top here. So right here, this is the pen, and I'm gonna press a little bit like that, and then this is always kind of crazy to do. You pull out this piece that looks like a piece of plastic almost. And that is the remnant of calcium bone that would normally be in a sea snail, right? So these are a mollusk, and this is an example of one of the vestigial organs that they have. And they use it as kind of a stabilizer inside of their body. It's not quite the same as the cuttle bone, I can show you what a cuttlebone looks like for a cuttlefish. Here is a cuttlebone. This is one I collected in Australia. So this is what a cuttlefish would have inside of it. And here's another species, a little bit larger of a cuttlebone. But you can see this is the stuff that's made of calcium. And while we're here, and I'm showing you stuff, this is a chambered nautilus shell. So you can see it actually stops right there. So the animal is all in this first part of the shell. And there's also a different species of nautilus called a paper nautilus that has a different type of shell. So these are all relatives of the squid. These are all cephalopods. Okay, so the next thing that I want to show you are the fins. So you can see here are the fins that are used kind of like the fins of a fish, helping them to swim. And up in front, you can see these really large eyes. They are really giant. If our eyes were proportional to those of a squid, we would have ones the size of dinner plates. And then the head has both arms and tentacles. So what do I mean by the difference here? So you'll see that there's certain ones that are longer. And then if you look closely, there's nothing on them until you get to the tips. And you can see that there are some suction pads right at the top. So that means that these are tentacles, and these two tentacles are used for kind of clubbing and then grabbing the prey, so they're for capture. These arms, which are different, are covered in suction cups, and they're used for taking the prey and taking it to the mouth. The other thing that's kind of cool about these long ones, these tentacles, is that in males, this is where they inject their sperm into the females. So these are called hectocotyls, which are weird organs that are used to take the sperm and transfer them into the female. If we look into the mouth of the squid, you will notice there is this big muscle here, and then right in the center is the beak, okay? And we can actually kind of squeeze out this beak. So let's see if I can pull it out here. There's the beak, and there's two parts of it. That's the first part, so you can see it's really hard, and that's what it's using for tearing apart the animal. And there should be in here a second part of the beak. There you can see it. So I pulled out the entire muscle. Obviously there has to be large muscles in order for it to be able to crunch. So here's the first part of that beak and the second part, and they just kind of go together, top and bottom, kind of like your jaw, the top and the bottom. So these are the hard parts of the squid. So next up, I am going to cut into the squid, and we're going to look at some of the internal organs. And I want to cut ventrally, so we're going to go here. Okay. And I'm just going to take some scissors and making sure not to cut any of the internal organs. One of the good reasons why we use squid for dissections is because there's not a whole lot to them. The organs are pretty easy to see, pretty easy to identify. Okay, so now we're going to open this animal up, and I'm going to lay it out like that. And the first thing that you can see pretty clearly is this kind of silvery black organ. This is the ink sac, and I can show you usually what people do is they use the pen. This is why It's called pen and ink. And you kind of stab into the ink sac. So this squid right here, I've squeezed the ink out of it, and you can see it really well. Okay, so that's where all the ink is. And then you can take the pen, put some ink in your pen, and then with that, you can draw or write. And so this is where the idea of pen and ink first came from, and a lot of our original ink came from squids. That was the first writing utensil we had that used ink, came from squid ink. Next up, you'll see these feathery organs on the side. These are the gills. So there's one on each side. And then as we go back, this is a male squid. All of this stuff right in here, this is the testes and the sperm. And I'm gonna open up another squid and find a female for comparison. So let's take this one. That actually is another male. Let's try this one. What it's going to look like, it's going to look more like gel. That's another male. One more try. Ratios are about 50-50. Oh, here we go. This one's a female. So side by side, what you notice is that this is big and white here. These are the eggs, the egg sacs, right? And then this is kind of like a more medium white, flowy substance. So this is a male, this one is a female, and you can tell them apart pretty easily. This female, actually, I can see very obviously where her hearts are. And so I'm gonna go ahead and point those out. They're kind of pink and they're right there. So I'll give you a close-up of that. So there's 3 hearts. You can see 2 of them there pretty well. The third one is usually right in the middle, but you kind of have to do some maneuvering to see them. Either way, that is what is pumping blood, and they have 3 hearts because they are fast-moving predators, so they need to really have a lot of energy, and in order to do that, they need their hemosyl, which is their version of blood, pumped in really well. The last thing that I'll show you here is their digestive system. So the digestive system starts off here, so it's going from the mouth. You can see this tube, and the tube runs down to a sac that is right underneath the gonads, which is a fancy way of saying the testes and the ovaries. And there is a sac that is underneath them, which is right here, which is their stomach. And this one, the stomach is empty, and that's pretty typical. Most of them will have empty stomachs in here. This one also has an empty stomach. I'll just check, because every once in a while you'll get one that has a fish in there or something kind of interesting. Doesn't look like we have much in there in any of these, but these tubes right here, so this is running down the esophagus, and then you can see it very clearly going to this kind of pouch underneath. The stomach is, it's kind of buried underneath those gonads, but you would see it full and a little bit easier to see on an animal that has just eaten. And the last thing I'll show you, one more thing, if you were to rip out all of those guts, right, and then get this flat part right here. Okay, so now you're just dealing with the mantle, this flat mantle, and you were to cut it into strips, and then take one of these strips and fry it up, and it'll curl. That's calamari. So when you go and you're eating fried calamari, this is the part of the squid that you're eating, and this was a squid that was meant to be eaten, so that's its sole purpose. So that is this dissection of a squid.